Yeah, welcome to the Savage Nation. Here's what got me going this week. The irreligious left, they're at it again. And what are they doing? They're attacking religion. Now, why shouldn't kids be able to say grace at a school meal? Does that bother you, saying grace at a meal? And what about the words, "In God we trust"? If they're on the dollar bill, why can't they be on a classroom wall? And a monument in Kentucky that featured the 10 Commandments has been put into storage. They put it in a closet. They put the 10 Commandments in the closet. Now, the 10 Commandments are the foundation of Judaism and Christianity. But aside from religion, the 10 Commandments are the foundation of law. What is wrong with having the 10 Commandments around where people can remember what they're about? Let me ask you people something. Which one of the big 10 don't you like? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's mule, thou shalt not give false witness. Which one of them don't you like? I've got a great guest to talk about these attacks on religion by the irreligious left. And let's look at the news of the week. In case you don't remember already, our president flew a fighter jet onto an aircraft carrier. Remember that one? President flew a fighter jet onto an aircraft carrier. He didn't fake it. Okay, it wasn't a movie. It wasn't going over to Bosnia in a flight jacket. It was a president landing a jet on a carrier. And then he made a great speech to our brave fighting forces. And yet, the Democrats still bashing him. Medicare, Medicaid, and the environment. Medicare, Medicaid, and the environment. Also, there's some interesting photographic news on the Savage Nation. The old York Times photo editor, in my opinion, should be dumped for what he puts on the front page. And a one-hour photo clerk in Texas should be fired for thinking that an innocent picture was kiddie porn. I'll tell you all about that as well later. But hold on a minute. I want to show you these headline pictures for a minute. Lynette, are you through with those newspapers yet? Yes. I want the Savage Nation to see them. Come out here. Look at these pictures. I want to show you some of the propaganda out there. If we can come in on them or whatever. You can go, whatever. Here it is. Here it is. The president lands, thank you, the president lands a jet on a fighter deck. Okay? Fine. Now, here's our president over here. He's the one with the gray hair. He's wearing an aviator suit, right? Now, why would the New York Times feature a flight deck guy in the yellow suit, a man who has an important job, but it's not flying a plane, it's waving planes down on the deck? Why would they put this man in the foreground and the president in the background? And why would they eliminate the airplane? And why would they eliminate the story of him landing the jet on the aircraft carrier, boys and girls? I'll have that answer for you when we do Agitprop 101 on the Savage Nation. There's a lot of sexually oriented news happening, but not like you think. I'll talk about the new AIDS bill. AIDS bill. $15 billion the president wants to give away to Africa and the Caribbean to control AIDS. I'll talk about why I think it's a very bad idea and a waste of money. I'll also talk about transsexual rights on the Savage Nation. What's that? Did you know that the California Assembly has passed a law which requires landlords and employers not to discriminate against transsexuals? Now, that sounds good, right? But if you don't hire them, you will be fined, even if you're a small business or an apartment owner, $150,000 if you don't hire a transsexual. Now, question. Since it is currently illegal to ask someone their sexual orientation, how are you going to know if someone's a transsexual, a cross-dresser, AC/DC and foot power? How are you going to know any of that? Well, you don't know. So here's the game. Here's how the liberals set it up. Let's say you have a job that requires certain skills, right? So a person comes in for the job, and they say to you, and let's say they're not qualified for that job. They don't have the skills. And they come in and they say to you, I'm a transsexual and I want this job. You say, okay, well, thank you for telling me. Thanks for sharing. But can you do this job? And the guy says, how dare you ask me if I could do the job? I think that I'm going to sue you for harassment and for violating my civil rights. See ya. And they have an instant lawsuit. And then they get that smirking lawyer, you know, the one who does the high-profile Hollywood cases, such as the shoplifting cases, or the other cases of babies and women floating in the bay. And the smirker comes out, and you pay $150,000 because the red diaper doper baby lawyers have infected our courts, and they've infected our rules. And we got to fix all of that in a Savage Nation. Now, you should be outraged by some of these attacks in the family. We have a gentleman from the Family Research Council named Peter Sprigg, who will be with us to talk about these assaults upon our culture. And what about the language police? Language police who want to get rid of the term founding fathers. Why? Because it might upset some people. Who might that upset? Maybe they want to change it into the founding furry freak brothers or the founding transsexuals. I don't know what they want to change it to. They were the founders and they were the fathers. And by the way, the language police have also tried to get rid of these words, such as Mickey Mouse, because mice might scare some children. I'm telling you, this is true. The textbooks can no longer have the words founding fathers or Mickey Mouse in them, or mice, excuse me. And we're going to tell you the other banned words in America today and show you what the left has been doing while we have been supporting the troops over there. And later on in the show, I have another great piece for you, which I call We Were Right, They Were Wrong. And I've compiled a list of the best quotes from the lefties about all the doom and gloom that they said was going to happen if we invaded Iraq. None of it happened. You hear? I'm going to read them out loud, and I'm going to name names. They were wrong about everything. And, of course, I'm going to name this week's Hollywood idiot. Oh, I don't have my award. Lynette, we need that award. Yeah, who's going to win the Hollywood Idiot Award of the Week? Remember, I'll give you a hint. He's a friend of Hillary's. Big surprise. And he hasn't been in a movie in about 10 years. Not also a big surprise. All of that on the Savage Nation today. So what I want you to understand is there's nowhere to go today but on the Savage Nation. Where else are you going to get an education like this that's going to help you save America from the liberal assault on our borders, language, and culture? Be with us on the Savage Nation today. As I say, be here or be nowhere. I'm Michael Savage.
The Word of God and the Word of Führers cannot be reconciled. Then God must go. I am absolutely clear in my own mind, and I think I can speak for the Führer as well, that both the Catholic and Protestant churches must vanish from the life of our people.
Thus spoke Dr. Alfred Rosenberg. And if you have any doubt that he spoke for his Führer, here's what happened.
Unbelievable stuff. You got to watch this. Religion is under attack in this country. Did you know the Christian cross had to be removed from all churches and cathedrals in Nazi Germany? Did you know that in addition to the Kristallnacht, where synagogues were destroyed in Nazi times, did you know the churches were also attacked? Many of you don't know this, but the Nazi movement was an anti-religious movement. They were outright anti-religious. And of course, in Russia, the Soviets were anti-religious as well. Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses, and he wanted to replace God with, I guess, the demigods called the commissars, in other words, government bureaucrats. Now, you hear a lot about the religious right, but I think you should know about the irreligious left, as I call them. In Kentucky, a monument with the Ten Commandments was put into storage in a closet because they say it violated the constitutional separation of church and state. That's a total lie. There is no constitutional separation of church and state. That's an invention of the radical left. The monument was supposed to be near the state capitol, and it was meant to emphasize the commandment's place in the history of law, as you well know. Now let's pause for a minute. What you don't know about that monument, I don't think we have a close-up of it, was that it had a cross on it at the bottom and two Jewish stars as well, two stars of David. And yet it didn't stop some so-called ministers and a so-called rabbi from joining the Marxist ACLU in trying to destroy this monument to the Ten Commandments. Also, students at VMI, at the Virginia Military Academy, can no longer say grace at meals because these rabid mad dogs of the left say it's unconstitutional. I don't know which constitution they're referring to. It may be a document written by one of their red diaper doper baby psychos at NYU. Now, what this means is that the students who want to pray can't, because it might upset the students who aren't religious, okay? And wait, it gets worse. And the Colorado Senate says that in God we trust can't be on the walls of your kid's classroom. Isn't this our national motto? It's even on a dollar bill. What do they want us to trust in, if not God? You tell me. How about a Pennsylvania teacher's aide who was suspended for wearing a cross because the school code says no religious garb? What do they mean? They think a cross is now like a Ku Klux Klan robe? What about freedom of religion instead of freedom from religion? Now, I'm going to have my guest on in a minute to talk about this assault on religion. She's a wonderful guest, Christine O'Donnell from SALT. But I have some questions for my listeners out there who can call 1-888-MSNBC-USA. One, why can't students at VMI say grace before meals? Why can't kids in Colorado see "In God We Trust" in their classroom? And why was a teacher's aide in Pennsylvania suspended for wearing a cross to work? How is this happening to us? Christine O'Donnell, she is the founder and president of SALT, the Saviors Alliance for Lifting the Truth. She joins us live from the MSNBC World Headquarters in New Jersey. Christine, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, what do you mean by Saviors Alliance for Lifting the Truth? Who's the savior?
Well, the SALT is obviously a Christian organization, but we do support the constitutional right to have freedom of religion. You don't have to prohibit religion or promote religion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And the thing that angers me the most
Christine,
about this,
would you defend the Buddhists' right to practice Buddhism?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing that offends me the most about this is the ACLU is claiming that this is a violation of some made-up constitutional right, and if they really were offended by this, then they would be going after every single elementary school, pulling out Halloween parades, because Halloween is a celebration of the Wicca religion.
Right.
But it's only about Christianity.
Well, Christine, do you agree with me that the ACLU is functioning very much like the early Marxists who said that religion is the opiate of the masses, and they wanted to replace religion as the opiate of the masses with government as the opiate of the masses?
Absolutely, absolutely. In the guise of so-called freedom of separation in church and state, they're trying to institute a communist country. And that sounds radical, but that's the truth. I mean, why aren't they trying to take out, thou shalt not kill? That's a religious concept. That's a commandment. Why are they not taking that out of our legal system?
Don't give them any ideas.
Right.
Don't give them any ideas. They're liable to expunge that from our doctrines. But what really disturbs me, did you see that opening video from the Frank Capra series that we ran before?
Yes,
of what the Nazis did? Very few people know that Christian church fathers were also put into concentration camps. Any Christian who opposed Hitler was thrown into a concentration camp along with the Jewish people. How come that's been forgotten?
Because it's all about judicial activism. It's all about rewriting history, and that's what we see, for example, in the Kentucky case. They are using a few appointed judges. They're abusing the role of the Supreme Court to override our constitutional process of amending the Constitution, of voting on these things, of having long, elaborate debates. It's kind of like we have the 9 people sitting there in Washington who have a constitutional monarchy, and that is an abuse of the system, but that's the way that they push their agenda. And if you'll also notice, with all of these cases, it's a few people.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. How can such a tiny, radical, rabid, mad dog minority have so much power?
Because
where is our Congress? Why can't Congress say to hell with them? Who gave them this power?
The Congress does, but then what happens is the Supreme Court makes an erroneous judgment, and then that sets the precedence. One of the things that also upsets me very much is about this poor teacher who was suspended without pay for wearing a cross, when just a couple days ago, I was on your network talking about the Iowa coach who was suspended with pay of $1.1 million for sexually harassing co-eds. Where's the outrage? Our outrage barometer is completely off balance.
But Christine, I want to go back to this. You have an organization, I have a TV show, I have a radio show, I have a book, and I am outraged that a small group of mad dog leftists have so much power. How can the listeners to the Savage Nation stop them from tearing our culture to pieces? What do you say? We got 30 seconds.
They need to arm themselves with awareness. The more people who know about the Constitution, the more people who know about the founding principles will understand and recognize when these lies come out in the media, they'll instantly recognize
that's what we got to do. We've got to give them the plan. Thanks, Christine, for being with me on the Savage Nation.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, we're going to talk about the news of the week on the Savage Nation, and we'll take your calls at 1-888-MSNBC-USA. The news of the week, including the big story of the week, a real president landing a real jet on a real aircraft carrier. Look how macho he looks. Isn't that beautiful? It pumped up his ego. It pumped up his juices. He didn't have to do the knee pad number, did he?
Because of you, our nation is more secure. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free.
Take a look at our president. To make that speech, as I said, he flew a jet onto the deck of an aircraft carrier, okay, in a jet that he co-piloted. He wasn't faking it, okay? He wasn't faking it. But meanwhile, on the liberal intellectual East Coast in Connecticut, Hillary once again demonstrated her foot-in-mouth disease. Let's listen to this on the set.
I thank you for your commitment to this party, to its values, and let's go forward and win here in Connecticut and around the country. Thank you very much.
Go forward? Go forward. Mao Zedong said 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards in order to take over a country. Was she screeching or shrieking? And what does she stand for? I don't know. And in Vermont, Howard Dean, another loser, another losing Democratic candidate for the new Marxist presidency, dared to say this about our armed forces. Listen, won't always have the strongest military, he said. We won't always have the strongest military. Can you believe this? And the old New York Times is apparently now a Buddhist newspaper. Yes? Lynette, let's show them this one. Now, I want to say this right now. I respect all of the principal religions of the world, including Buddhism. I have read Buddhism on my radio show for years. But I want to ask you something. This is a photo of the funeral of a soldier killed in Iraq. There it is. It's up on the big screen. He happened to be Buddhist. Any loss of life is tragic. But why would the old York Times have chosen this particular funeral and this particular photo for the front page? I'm sure there wasn't more than 1 or 2 deaths buried, folks buried in the Buddhist tradition. Why don't they show a Christian being buried? Because Christianity is under attack by the radical mad dog left. And here's another photography story. In Texas, you heard about this one? It's a killer. Child Protective Services agents took a baby away from her mother. Why? Why? A baby away from her mother? Because someone at a 1-hour Photoshop thought that a picture that the dad developed of the mom breastfeeding was somehow kiddie pornography. And so the developer called the authorities, quote unquote. Whatever happened to parents' rights? That's what I'd like to know. 1-888 MSNBC USA on this and other topics on the Savage Nation. Anne Marie in South Carolina, welcome to the Savage Nation. What's your comment or question?
Well, my comment is regarding the high school teacher that had the cross.
Yes.
All right. Do they have any Muslim teachers in that state that wear the head cover?
Well,
that's their religious thing, isn't it?
Anne Marie, you know, you raise a very good point. Do you remember there was a case recently in Florida where a woman wearing a burqa, not just the headscarf, but covering her face, refused to take the covering off her face for a photo driver's license?
Yes,
she could have been Osama bin Laden under there. We wouldn't have known. And take a guess who defended her. The very same left-wing punks who are trying to take away religion everywhere in the country jumped forward and said so sweetly, oh, we believe in freedom of religion in this country.
Yeah, right. Now,
I have... Thank you. I mean, look, I see them for who they are. Timothy doesn't agree. He's entitled to it. In Moorhead, Kentucky, you're on the Savage Nation. Timothy, are you with us, or did you drop off there? I don't even know. Timothy, thanks for calling. Mark in Seattle, you're on the Savage Nation. What's on your mind? Question or comment?
I had a comment for you, Dr. Savage. I love your suit, by the way.
You notice how I dropped the turtleneck. It's too hot for it today.
Well, it looks, it makes you look snappier. It really does.
Yeah, but now I'm going to start to look like, if I go to a white shirt and tie, then just take me out of here and put me in a nut house. Because then I'm going to start to get like Peter Jennings, and it'll be all over.
You'll never be like Peter Jennings. No.
Thanks for the compliment.
I just wanted to say that what you have here is 80 years of hard left brainwashing in education. And, you know, whenever I hear about these idiots that talk about how you can't even mention God in the public arena, they don't know what they're talking about. Let me give you a good example. James Madison, he practically wrote the Bill of Rights.
Yeah. So, okay, I get it. I understand. Of course there's no... Look, let me just explain it to you in simple terms. There is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. What they're trying to say is that something exists that doesn't exist. In fact, the country was founded by religious Christians, if you don't remember. That's who founded the country. They were not irreligious atheists. They were religious Christians. After the break, we're going to talk with Peter Sprigg from the Family Research Council, a really great group, about transsexual rights. What transsexual rights? I don't care what a person does in their closet, but why should they get preferential treatment out on the street? That's the whole issue here. You know, do as you wish, but don't tell me you're special and that I have some lesser right than you do. And that's what's going on here. We're living, in case you don't know it, in Alice in Haterland. Alice in Haterland. Okay?
Borrow a 10 with pot out.
Well, it's fun. I have nothing against anyone's sexuality. I told you that 1,000 times. Okay? I'm a sexual libertarian, but I don't like special rights for people, one side or the other. Welcome back to the Savage Nation, an oasis of sanity in a world gone mad. And I'm going to help you maintain your sanity right here in the Savage Nation. We're talking about sex this segment. First, sexually transmitted disease. And which one is the biggest? AIDS. It is largely a sexually transmitted disease. Of course, it can be transmitted through blood, as you well know, and things of that nature. Now, President Bush signed a bill that provides $15 billion to prevent AIDS, but not in America, in Africa and the Caribbean. Why, and why so much money? I want to stop right there for 1 minute. Do you think we should be spending $15 billion in Africa and the Caribbean? I don't, and a number of reasons I don't, and we'll talk about that. What about abstinence? Or what about proper education instead of an expensive condom airlift over Africa and the Caribbean? And speaking of proper education, new legislation in California might mean that your kids won't be able to tell if their teacher is a Mr. or a Mrs. The state assembly approved civil protection for transsexuals. Here's a state going bankrupt. They can't keep the lights on. They took an IOU yesterday for $11 billion. They raised taxes. They drive businesses out. But what's their first order of business? Anyone who doesn't fit a traditional gender image or a transsexual and who applies for jobs or housing gets special protection in the late great state of California. They used to call it the Golden State. I'd like to give it a new name, but I can't do it here on the Savage Nation today. So now we go on to Johnny. Johnny, who wants to be a Janie, applies for a job. And if I don't hire him, I can be sued for discriminatory practices. Why is sexual preference a civil right? It is not a civil rights issue. My guest is Peter Sprigg of the Family Research Council. Peter, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, I've seen you before. I've had the work of the FRC on my shows and the radio for years. I love your work. Well, what is going on? Haven't they ratcheted up their attack on the family?
Well, I certainly think so, now that the very concepts of male and female, which most people would think of as fundamental biological realities, are under attack.
Yeah, yes. That's an interesting one. What is the end game here, Peter? What do they want to achieve, the radical left? What's their final vision?
Well, you know, this is really a war on normal. It's a war against norms. The fundamental ideological conviction is that that it is unacceptable to define anything as normal or abnormal, and that it's oppressive to suggest that any particular behaviors or cultural standards should be accepted as norms. But the problem is when tolerance becomes the only norm, then that leads to the ultimate intolerance, which is the silencing of anyone who disagrees. And that's
Amen.
what we see happening.
Peter, I can speak to that. Believe me, I faced it my entire career. And you know, I compare this to the brown shirts in Nazi Germany. I'm not going to mince words, and I have to state things as they are. In Nazi Germany, as you know, when the good German brown shirts went out and they didn't like Jews, they wrote the word Jude in the window, meaning Jew, and they told Germans not to shop there. Now, the radical left in this country is doing the same thing with this sexuality here. Anyone who doesn't kowtow to their agenda is basically ostracized, boycotted, and told to disappear from the commercial scene. Isn't that a form of fascism?
Well, it's certainly forcing their will upon a lot of other people who don't want to bow to it. In this particular case with these transgender non-discrimination bill that just passed the California Assembly, as with a lot of other legislation in this area in terms of gay rights and so forth, there's a real misunderstanding of the concept of rights and a misunderstanding of the concept of discrimination. You mentioned special rights,
right.
and people like me sometimes get mocked for using this term special rights. The reason is that there's a difference between fundamental constitutional rights, like the right of free speech or freedom of religion or the right to vote, the right to trial by jury. Those are things that every individual has and that nobody has any right to abridge. But there is no absolute fundamental constitutional right to a job, as anybody who's ever been unemployed knows.
Right.
So the special right, the reason why this is a special right or a special protection is that what you're doing with this type of legislation is creating the right to sue your employer if you feel like you've been badly treated because of this
Peter,
particular...
I saw you debate this week on MSNBC with a so-called San Francisco supervisor who got on his high horse and tried to stop you by saying that he was gay, but then he tried to say to you, well, I'm Jewish and I was a former seminary student. What I would have liked to say to him is, so what? You were a seminary student. Joseph Stalin started out in the seminary. Look what he did to Russia. So why do they always play the moral high ground, these Marxist game players? Here's what worries me. If a fellow goes in for a job and it requires certain skills, and he happens to be dressed as a woman, and he says to the person he's in the office, I want this job, and I'm a transsexual. And then the employer says, can you do the job? And he says, that's irrelevant. What's relevant is my sexuality. I'm going to sue you. Peter, isn't that what worries you?
Well, that's one thing that worries me, is that you'll have an explosion of litigation as a result of this, and employers will be cowed into not even applying legitimate standards when they're faced with an applicant like that. That is a consideration. But an interesting thing is, in this bill, there is a little provision that acknowledges that employers can set reasonable standards for dress and grooming, and that seems to be an acknowledgement that that how you look and how you present yourself is important in terms of getting along with your coworkers, in terms of making a good impression for your employer on customers or clients. And if they can set reasonable standards for dress and grooming on that basis, I can't understand why it's not reasonable to set a standard of gender-appropriate dress and grooming as well.
Well, where is this going to lead? You're saying they want to outlaw all normalcy, meaning what? Do you think NAMBLA, the folks, the men, the deviant, psychotic men who want to sleep with young boys in the group called NAMBLA, the predators, the perverts, are they the ones pushing the buttons on this, Peter?
Well, I think they're a relatively fringe group, although there are certainly people. This is a continuation of a whole movement of sexual liberation that, you know, began in the 60s or whatever, and it's all tied in together, and it's not going to stop as long
Peter,
as we
don't you
don't
agree
stand
it's
up
a
against
madness?
it.
I'm for liberation of all kinds, but when you, after 20 years, when you see that you had an outbreak of every STD known to mankind, including those that kill you, wouldn't you think that anyone who's sane would say, wait a minute, hold on now, maybe there are certain liberations that have gone too far, and maybe we ought to pull back a little bit? Peter, I got to run, but you are the greatest. I love your organization. Keep up the good fight for America. Thanks, Peter. Up next on the Savage Nation, another form of control. The language police want to change the way your kids learn history and language. They call it sensitivity. I call it censorship. Stick around right here on the Savage Nation. I won't disappoint you. I'm Michael Savage. It's a fact that the Constitution was written by men. But did you know that the men who wrote the Constitution aren't called founding fathers in some history books? Because that sounds biased against some very sensitive women. The language police are at it again. Publishers call it sensitivity to different viewpoints when they sanitize textbooks, but there's another word for it, and you know what it is. It's not sensitivity, it's censorship. These censors also oppose images that they say create bad role models for children. Let me give you some examples. They don't like Mickey Mouse or Stuart Little, because why? Mice might scare certain children. Now, how about a picture of a woman cooking for her family? That's bad, too. Why? It might offend liberated working women. You don't want to show a woman cooking. An image of an old person with a walker. Also, it's an unrealistic negative stereotype. Yeah, sure. Cake, candy, and soda? No, you can't put them into a textbook either because they're not nutritious enough. You've got to have, I guess, a tofu something or other. And dinosaurs. Better not teach kids about them anymore. They're way too controversial. They may not have existed. Here are some more words that your kids won't learn anymore. Able-bodied is replaced by non-disabled. Wait a minute, this is crazy. Isn't this backwards? Aren't able-bodied people the majority? American. Simple word, right? There's no suggested replacement for this, but you can't say it in a textbook. Ugh, American. You can't say American because it suggests geographical chauvinism. Unless you mean all of America, that is South and Central America too, but it doesn't include them because those are the good Americas and North America is the bad America. So what should we call ourselves? People of the big, the big sky country? People of the big continent? How about deaf? I'd say it if you're deaf. Deaf is now replaced by person with loss of hearing. To me, one word is better than 5. If textbook publishers get paid by the word, they just made 5 times as much on this one term alone. No wonder the kids are getting scoliosis from carrying those backpacks. Elderly is replaced by older person. But before I say anything about that, these idiots also say you can't use the word old because it implies dependency and other negative connotations. So you could say older person, but not old. These censors are even censoring their own censorship. But that's madness. How about fat? We all know what fat is, don't we? Fat is replaced by heavy. Okay? Don't eat too much cake. It's heavying. Okay? Founding fathers now becomes the framers. Of course, that could offend somebody too. It's a fact that they were all men. Framers sounds like the interior decorators who hung the paintings. He has now become he or she. Again, if it was a man who did something, why not say so, right? Jungle. I've spent a lot of time in the rainforest. Well, it's also a jungle. Why must a jungle be a rainforest? In order to make you more sensitive to the rainforest, I suppose. Have you ever read Kipling's The Rainforest book? No, you read the Jungle Book. Have you seen the Disney movies? They're classics, and they were called the Jungle Book. Apparently, you can't use the word Middle East. It should now be called Southwest Asia because Middle East reflects a geographical viewpoint. I guess they want to take the circle out of the globe. But looking at it from America, isn't that where it's located, in the Middle East? How about the word yacht? They don't want to use it at all. No suggested replacement. But you can't use the word yacht. It's just considered too elitist. Now, isn't a yacht a luxury item? It should be elitist. There should be distinctions and separations. There are no banned words, though, that start with Z. That's good. But I'd like to add one right now. How about 0 for what these people's opinions are worth from the Savage Nation point of view? Let's go to our callers right now on some of the earlier topics. Roy in New York, welcome to the Savage Nation. What is your question or comment?
Yeah, Mike, you're talking about these transsexual people. 1968, when I was in the Marine Corps, out in uniform on Liberty.
Yeah.
Standing on...
We just lost that caller. Sorry about that. We'll go on to the next one. Tom in Southern California on the same issue. Welcome to the Savage Nation. Topic, please.
Hi. I want to talk about, you're talking about all these names like yacht and all this. How about we call the right wing the Jew and Christian party? Because the thing is, actually, the right wing, what they're doing is they're basically putting out the viewpoints of Jews and Christians.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that there are no Buddhists who are... Wait, hold on, sir. No, shut your mouth, first of all. It's my... Shut up. It's my show. Shut him down. Shut this loud mouth up. Shut him off in my ear. You're telling me that there are no Buddhists and there are no Islamists in this country who are conservative? Which world do you live in, nutbar? Which world do you live in? You're telling me there are no atheists who are right-wingers? You're telling me there are no atheists who believe in borders, language, and culture? Don't be stupid, okay? Forget about it. Tony in San Diego, welcome to the Savage Nation. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They've already started this stuff with the transgender stuff. I had a guy come into my restaurant in Hillcrest here in San Diego, which is a heavily gay community,
Right.
but it's a family restaurant that's been here for 33 years. I inherited it from my parents. This guy came in, he was about 6'2", 6'3", with heels on, and he didn't even shave, and he was dressed as a woman. And I didn't hire him. That's not even the reason why I didn't hire him, but I didn't hire him because he was extremely obnoxious.
Yeah.
I had to go to a gender sensitivity program, cost me $275 the time I took off work, and they fined me $800.
But that's communism. That's living in China with thought police. How could this be going on in America, Tony? How could this be happening to sane, normal, decent, patriotic Americans? I guess you're one of those right-wing Christians or Jews that last idiot talked about. I guess you don't want to go along with the program, eh, Tony? Unbelievable to me. This is the world we live in. It gets me crazy because these people are sick. They're sick in the head. But worse than that, they're taking over the entire culture. And you know something who I blame? I blame the spineless Republicans. I know what to expect from the demon cats, okay? We know which side of the river they're on. But you'd expect a Republican to stand up and fight on the cultural war background once in a while instead of putting on their check pants and going to the country club to see how much money they can shake down from people. Why don't the Republicans act like it and put some of the conservatism back in the Republican Party? When we come back on the Savage Nation, we have a special segment. We were right and they were wrong. We're also going to have the Hollywood Idiot. And I'll remind you of all the crazy predictions that the liberals made about the horrors that were going to happen if we went to Iraq. And of course, we will reveal who is this week's Hollywood Idiot on the Savage Nation. We have to show you that we're going to have a big winner here on the Savage Nation. Who is it going to be? Who is going to get this award? He hasn't been in a movie in years, but he was used by Hillary Clinton to introduce her at a fundraiser in Connecticut. Stay tuned and I'll show you who the winner is right here on the Savage Nation for this and other cultural stupidity.
The read we get on the people of Iraq is there's no question but what they want to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and they will welcome as liberators the United States when we come to do that.
Remember before the war when all the whiny liberal Hollywood types and folks at the left, the old York Times writers, were predicting disaster if we went into Iraq? Remember, we'd get bogged down, terrible things would happen. Well, where are they now? I call this segment, We Were Right, They Were Wrong. These are some quotes from the doomsayers. Let's read them as they weep. Here's one. If President Bush thinks our invasion and occupation will go smoothly because Iraqis will welcome us, then he is deluding himself. That is a writer for the New York Times. Now, to his credit, he has since apologized. The next quote. The United States is going to leave Iraq with its tail between its legs, defeated. We will not be able to win this war. Well, hey, what would you expect from Scott Ritter on South African radio? That's pretty far to go. With every passing day, it's more evident that the Allies made gross military misjudgments. Another great writer for the old York Times, R.W. Apple, and that apple is not shining very much anymore. Visions of cheering throngs welcoming them as liberators have vanished in the wake of a bloody engagement whose full casualties are still unknown. Okay? Welcome to hell. James Webb, again in the old York Times. They were all wrong. They thought they would be greeted as liberators and that the regime would collapse like a house of cards. But they underestimated Iraqi patriotism. That's the far-left street fighter Joschka Fischer, the Marxist German foreign minister. Jawohl. You cannot subdue a large and hostile city except by destroying it completely. This is John Kenneth Galbraith. Can you believe it? A once famous historian. I know what's going on with this guy. Send him some Lexington. Listen to what he's saying. We will not inherit a pacified Iraq. Tell that to the people who are dancing in the street. Tell that to the people who are crying over the disinterred graves of their dead relatives. Here's another one on They Were Wrong, We Were Right. Patriotic Iraqis prefer to bear the yoke of Saddam's brutal and corrupt dictatorship than to suffer the humiliation of living in a conquered nation. That's a cartoonist who I never heard of, but apparently he's loved by many leftists. Another one. The idea that Iraq's population would have welcomed American forces entering the country after a terrifying aerial bombardment was always utterly implausible. Edward Said, London Review of Non-Books. And now, what you've all been waiting for. Who is this week's Hollywood Idiot? Here's a hint. He hasn't made a movie in decades. Everything he's touched has turned to dust. And you know that screechy Hillary Clinton speech I've been playing for you? Well, this loser was the guy who got to introduce it to the audience. I think he thought he was being funny. Take a listen, and you'll see who the winner is on the Savage Nation.
And now that Bush and his bunt cake cabinet has smoothly rid us of the imminent threat that Iraq posed and captured Saddam, and all those darn weapons of mass destruction have been uncovered.
Now, for that in his pathetic career, Chevy is still chasing his tail. And Chevy Tail Chaser is this week's Hollywood idiot. We even forgot he existed, frankly. I didn't even know he was still around. Hillary is really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Who's going to be next? Groucho Marx? I mean, I don't know who they're going to disinter. Let's take some callers on the Savage Nation. 1-800-449-8255 is not the number. That's my talk radio number, which I must tell you about because I'm on talk radio every day of the week in your local market. The phone number here is 1-888-MSNBC USA. If you get on the show, you'll talk to more people than you'll meet for the rest of your life. Let us go to Mike in Florida. Mike, welcome to the Savage Nation. What's your comment, please?
Yes. Hello, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good. What's up?
Well, when you were talking about they were wrong and we were right, etc., that I'm wondering if it couldn't be that perhaps we haven't quite had enough time for any repercussions to occur. I believe in general that they were wrong.
I guess we could wait for a bomb to go, an atom bomb to go off, and then they could say they were right and we were wrong.
Well, no, I don't think quite that. I mean, it's the same thing like when they're talking about the weapons of mass destruction. I figured that it would take some time before we would find them. I don't think there's been enough time for that.
I'm not a Pollyanna about this. I know there are going to be terrible times ahead, even in Iraq, as there are in Afghanistan, with our brave men dying. But as Napoleon said, the tough work begins at the moment of victory. We're at the point of victory. Doesn't mean we're at the point of changing this population from one of a subdued despotism into some semblance of a participatory democracy. I don't know if these people will ever be ready for it. Do you?
I have no idea.
I don't either. I think that it takes, thanks, Guy, I think it takes a lot of training and learning and love, and you need the Founding Fathers in the matrix of the country for people to understand how to be civilized. I don't know that we can impose this kind of democracy on those people. I really don't. Thank you. And before I go on, I got to tell you something. One of my listeners is a California highway patrolman on my radio show, and he sent me a fax that I couldn't believe. I got it late last night. He said that he had to go to state-required diversity training recently for anger management for all state workers in this state of California. And the trainer said to them, one of the things that provokes anger in people is talk radio. So we suggest that you don't listen to talk radio when you're driving a car. You talk about thought control, you talk about thought police, you talk about censorship, you talk about Brave New World, you talk about 1984, you talk about it can't happen here. Let me tell you something. It has happened here. It is here. And I want to tell you something else. The Savage Nation is your guidebook to saving America from the liberal assault on our borders, language, and culture. It is my Bible, and I want it to become your Bible. I don't know how long this book is going to live, but I'll tell you something else. It is my Bible. Make it your Bible. Next week on the Savage Nation will be another turn at the wheel of fortune and the wheel of misfortune. Let's make sure America turns the wheel of fortune instead of the wheel of misfortune that is being spun to the left by the radical, insane, left-wing Democrat Party. This is Michael Savage. See you next week right here on the Savage Nation.